Hey guys, good afternoon. We are continuing to track Tropical Storm Nicholas. I'm Meteorologist Erica Lopez, and I want to give you an update as the newest advisory from the NHC has came in, and it did register higher winds now at 65 miles per hour. And you can see on the MyRadar app where exactly Tropical Storm Nicholas is at the current moment. So just off the coast of Corpus Christi. Corpus Christi has actually been receiving a lot of the wind over the past couple of hours there. Because of Tropical Storm Nicholas. So we're continuing to track this. The newest track actually has it landfalling sometime this evening into the overnight hours. So we're definitely going to be tracking this. It'll bring a lot of heavy rain into parts of Texas. So far right now, like I said, we were seeing wind gusts up to 65 mile per hour sustained winds, and that's why it's still tropical storm status. But they have registered some 675 mile per hour wind gusts. Now, if this stays over water any longer, it does have the potential to become hurricane strength, and that is at 74 mile per hour sustained wind. So we're definitely tracking this, and it really does have a chance to do that right before landfall. So right now it's about 70 miles south of Port O'Connor, Texas. If you're in those areas, you're already receiving a lot of the heavy rainfall in these regions. And of course, we're still seeing tropical storm warnings in effect, as well as hurricane watches. Storm surge warnings are also continuing for parts of the Texas coast, and even storm surge watches and extended into parts of Louisiana. So storm surge is definitely a big deal with this, but I also want to turn on the power track or power outages map just to track exactly what we're seeing so far. So right around the Texas coast, Wharton County has about 743 customers without power. But note, if we take a look at this track, there are still counties in Louisiana that are still dealing with power outages because of what Hurricane Ida brought to this area. Right now, Terrebonne Parish already has, or still has, 20,000 customers without power, and the track of Tropical Storm Nicholas is going to go right over this area. Although when it does go over this area, it's likely to be a tropical depression or a remnant low over this area, but it's still going to bring a lot of heavy rain to this area, which is not good news, especially for the recovery efforts in these areas. But right now, of course, Tropical Storm Nicholas bringing heavy rain and even gusty winds. So I want to take a look at a couple videos for you just so you can get a picture of what exactly is happening out there in Texas. And the first one I want to show you actually is from NWS Corpus Christi, and they recorded this video and it's showing pretty gusty winds over these areas. And it was showing as well a little bit of that water rise. And it's important to note with that water rise, thankfully around this time right now, it is low tide. And usually a high tide, at least for this time of year in this area, occurs in the overnight hours. We'll talk about that more in a little bit, but I just want you to see this picture, this crazy picture of all the rain that occurred there in the Corpus Christi area. And then you can see all of that water rising. There's essentially no beach here, and it's definitely windy and gusty in that area. Another video I want to show you is also from Texas, and just showing the amount of rain that they're are receiving and have received over the past couple of hours in these areas. So really the rain, I think, is the biggest impact with Tropical Storm Nicholas, and it's very important to note because of how crazy these storms are. But take a look at that video. Of course, you can see the shelf cloud over the area, and that usually is when you see a picture like this, that means gusty winds are going to come at you. And especially right behind these gusty winds is a lot of heavy rain in these regions. So definitely, if you're on the Texas coast, all along Corpus Christi to even in parts of Louisiana, just make sure you're precautious of the weather over the next couple of hours. It's going to be pretty heavy, at least in terms of rain and even gusty wind. So let's take a look right now at what the current wind gusts are doing all across the Texas coast. So if you can see my map, we have wind gusts in Port Aransas up to 29 mile per hour wind speeds. Currently, we did see gusts higher than this in Galveston as well. This is the area you really need to watch. If you're anywhere around the Galveston area, landfall might be close to you heading into the next couple of hours. But right now, 21 mile per hour wind gusts and speeds in those areas. And then a little bit more inland Houston, not really receiving the brunt of the storm yet, but that'll change overnight, and 26 mile per hour wind speeds right now in Port Lavaca. So if we take a look at the potential storm surge flooding, I want you to note that if you are between Seadrift, Port Lavaca to even Brazos Port, this is where the highest storm surge will occur, possibly occur. Doesn't mean that you'll get 3 to 5 feet of storm surge, but this is possible. And especially with that landfall being around the overnight hours in this area, high tide is around 1:30 or 12:30 12:30 in the morning. So this is what concerns me. We may get a little bit of storm surge and even water rise in this area, and especially closer to landfall, as a lot of that heavy rain occurs on that right side of the storm. So just something to be careful. If you have any family members in those areas, maybe closer to the coast, just make them aware of these conditions. We may get some high water rise because of Tropical Storm Nicholas, but elsewhere you're seeing 2 to 4 feet of storm surge possible, and then 1 to 3 feet of storm surge in the Louisiana area. Just something important to note and keep in mind, especially with that high tide happening overnight. And here are the rainfall totals. They have shifted now as that forecast continues to change. 7 to 15 inches of rain is still not out of the realm. You may get some localized flooding of up to 20 inches of rain. This is life-threatening flooding, and this is the most important impact with Tropical Storm Nicholas. And you can see in those red shaded areas and even highlighted in yellow, that's where we might see the highest rainfall totals, especially all across the Texas coast. And that yellow area just south of Houston, that is possibly where we might get a landfall in the overnight hours. Just something to be careful. And that also extends in those areas that have been threatened or that have seen the impacts of what Hurricane Ida left just a couple weeks ago in these areas. So definitely not good news for any recovery efforts that are ongoing there. And I also want to talk about the severe weather risk with these storms. You cannot forget the potential of seeing some quick spin up tornadoes with this as those bands come into the coast, and they may cause those outer bands, especially some spin ups in them. So that's why we have a moderate risk of tornadoes today. High winds and flooding, of course, always likely, but especially in that yellow shaded area just south of Houston. So Galveston, you're in on this. You may get some of those isolated tornadoes popping up as we get closer to landfall. And this, of course, is in the overnight hours, and it'll be dark. So if you live in these areas, just make sure that you're receiving the alerts, especially for tornadoes in the next coming hours. And there are flash flood watches in place as well, because we are going to see a lot of torrential rainfall. So here's timing it out over the next couple of hours. So all the rain still across the Texas coast. You can kind of see where the circulation is. We don't have a defined center of circulation just yet, but this model does suggest that we'll get something at least heading into later overnight and even tonight. So you can see all the rain bands really occurring on the right side of the storm. And this is what I'm talking about. This area, Galveston, I am concerned with the possibility of some storm surge just because high tide is going to occur at 12:30 in the evening, or I should say overnight. And with that high tide combination with the wind and even this heavy rain, and we may see some impacts of this heading into the evening and overnight. And you can see how we get some sort of center of circulation heading into the overnight. So this is what we're calling for in terms of the landfall, and all the rain still continuing on the right side. Houston, you'll get in on this rain as well. And then this eventually pushes to the east and into Louisiana, as that forecast cone has suggested. But it is also, this forecast model is also suggesting that the center might move a little bit over water before coming inland again. But of course, as this goes inland, it will weaken significantly, and it will be a tropical depression and even remnant low as we get closer to Wednesday. But Wednesday is really the day. If you're in Louisiana, you're still recovering from Hurricane Ida, this is when the rain's going to start to come in, and this is where all that torrential rainfall will occur as well. So as early as 6 in the morning on your Wednesday in parts of Louisiana. And so let's time out exactly when those hurricane, or I should say tropical storm force winds may occur, and you may feel them as early as tonight. 8 p.m. So you can see those red shaded areas. That signifies 40 to 50 mile per hour winds in that purple shaded area, especially closer to the coast in the Galveston region. That's where you may see some 60 plus mile per hour wind gusts with these tropical storm force winds occurring inland. And of course, if you've been in Corpus Christi, you're already receiving the brunt of the storm in terms of rain and wind. And then as we head into the later portion of the week, you're going to see some of those, I guess I should say, tropical depression storm winds, but still something to keep in mind. 20 to 30 mile per hour winds across Louisiana with all that heavy rain. So taking a look at the overall picture, we're not only just tracking Tropical Storm Nicholas, there is an 80% chance of formation with this tropical wave coming off of Africa. So this is something that we definitely need to watch over the next coming days, especially with how the track may form over the next coming days. And then we have a 50% chance closer to home, just off the East Coast, but this will form typically, or this has a chance to form in the midweek of this week. So definitely still a pretty active season so far. We are at the peak of it. But if we take a closer look at what's happening with Tropical Storm Nicholas, that track, like I mentioned, may make landfall between tonight and even heading into the overnight, so Tuesday. And it's going to be close to hurricane status. Right now, the Hurricane Center has put it at 70-mile-per-hour winds by Tuesday morning. Like I mentioned earlier, we need 74-mile-per-hour wind gusts to receive that hurricane status. So definitely going to be close, maybe a Cat 1 right before landfall. And then as it heads into the inland areas like Houston, you'll receive the brunt of it by Wednesday overnight. But you'll see a lot of the rain before that with 35-mile-per-hour winds, and then eventually it becomes a tropical depression and a remnant low by Wednesday and Thursday. And then Thursday really is when the storm will start to dissipate. So let's take a look back at what we're seeing on the app right now just to check in on the current conditions, and we're going to check in on those power outages as well. So right now you can see Tropical Storm Nicholas right off the coast of Corpus Christi. A lot of heavy rain has been reported in these areas. Not much of a storm surge been reported in these areas just yet, but of course that'll change as we get into the later overnight hours. And let's take a look at the current conditions. So right now it's a 65-mile-per-hour storm, at least in terms of sustained speeds. Gusts up to 75 mile per hour. And of course, like I said, we need 74 to reach that hurricane status, 74 mile per hour sustained wind gusts, or I should say sustained winds, not gusts. And 75 mile per hour gusts have been registered. Of course, this is 70 miles south of Port O'Connor with the latest advisory that occurred at 5 p.m. Eastern time. If you're in Texas, 4 p.m. Central time. And we still have a lot of alerts in place too. If we turn on the alert layer, watches and warnings, you're seeing all those reds and purples that signify tropical storm warnings, tropical storm, and even flash flood watches in those green shaded areas. And of course, flash flood watches is for a lot of the Texas coast, as you're going to receive a lot of that rain over the next coming hours, and they're still calling for up to 15 inches of rain, especially localized through these areas. And this is through Tuesday evening, so it's Monday. After we get through tomorrow, that's when all the rain will move out of the area. So you still have a couple more hours and even days of just torrential rainfall in these areas. So of course, if you're in these areas, just be mindful of that. Stay off the roads. You will see some flooding, especially localized flooding in these areas. And then as we head into the Louisiana area, we are seeing storm surge warnings as well in those areas. And then we're seeing just a couple of power outages right now, and we check in on Colorado County, just under 400 customers without power. So these will start to go up as those tropical storm force winds occur later on in the overnight hours and even tonight. So tonight into overnight is really the time frame that you need to be paying attention to Tropical Storm Nicholas, because that's when the impacts will arrive to the Texas coast. And of course, always tracking what's happening in Louisiana, because they're still feeling the effects of what Hurricane Ida left behind. And as that storm passes over the area as a remnant low, it'll still bring a lot of heavy rain to this region. And so we're definitely tracking this closely, because there's still ongoing power outages all across Louisiana, with Terrebonne Parish at about 20,000 customers without power in these regions. So just something I wanted to quick give you an update on. And so let's take a look at what's happening with the winds just to check in on them. And you're seeing those winds still at about 20, Port Aransas 29 current wind speed right now, 26 in Port Lavaca, and then Galveston, you're seeing a wind speed of about 21 miles per hour. So definitely still an active scene there that we're seeing all across Texas, and then you're seeing those clouds as well, and that's indicative of you're going to see all that moisture and rain, and even all that tropical moisture still lingering in parts of South Texas, although most of the wind is already gone from areas of Brownsville to maybe South Padre Island. You're still seeing a lot of those wind gusts and even a little bit of rain continuing. But if you're in South Texas, far South Texas, expect those conditions to at least improve as we head into the next couple of hours there. But of course, I always want to talk about storm surge. Maybe you're just now tuning in, wanting to get all the facts on what Tropical Storm Nicholas is going to bring and even the impacts. Storm surge is definitely one of the impacts that we may see with this. At least as of right now, we're not seeing any major impacts in terms of storm surge. Now, this map is showing us the potential of what we may see with storm surge. It doesn't mean that everybody's going to receive this kind of storm surge. So 3 to 5 feet is the highest that we're going to see with this. And this is in between Seadrift, Texas and Brazosport, Texas. And then 1 to 3 feet between Cameron and Franklin, Louisiana, 2 to 4 feet between Brazosport and even Cameron, Louisiana. So South Texas, you won't see much of a threat, at least as of right now, but later on as we get that high tide. And high tide is going to occur around 12:30 if you're in the Galveston area. Galveston is just right outside of that 3 to 5 feet. But if that high tide were to occur as the storm is making landfall, that's a little bit concerning, because that's when you're going to start to see that possibility of water rise of up to 3 to 5 feet in those areas. Just something to be precautious about. Not everybody's going to see this again, but water rise is definitely one of the bigger impacts with the storm, as well as the impact and the risk of flooding. Flooding is always a major factor with these types of landfalling tropical storms, and possibly hurricane if Nicholas can get its strength and stay over water a little bit longer. But of course, that 7 to 15 is the localized highest amount that we may see with this, and we're definitely seeing this on this map over the next coming hours. But across the Texas coast, and this also includes Louisiana, you can't forget them, although Tropical Storm Nicholas is just right outside of Texas, the Texas coast. It also will track into parts of Louisiana. New Orleans, you may get in on this 5 to 7 feet of rain, or inches of rain, over the next coming hours. And so just something to be aware of. You already saw the rain, torrential rain from what Ida brought, so you're going to get in on this rain. And especially with how this year has played out all across the Gulf Coast, a lot of these soils are already saturated. So any rain that falls will definitely cause any flooding in these regions. So just something to be aware of. And I just want to pinpoint on this map those yellow shaded areas. That's where we may see some of the highest totals in terms of rainfall. Just something to keep in mind as you're heading out in the next couple of days. And something else you can't forget with these tropical storms, especially as they're closer to landfall, you may get a few spin up tornadoes. So that's why we have a moderate risk of tornadoes all across the Texas coast, and that does include Houston. So make sure that you have your alerts turned on your phone, and you're checking in on the MyRadar app as well, because this is going to be a good picture of what you're going to see in terms of conditions all across the Texas coast, and especially if there are any tornado warnings, severe warnings that are issued, especially heading into the overnight hours. So from tonight to overnight, that's when the time frame that you really need to be paying attention to this weather, because that's when it'll be gusty, and that's the possibility, highest threat at least, of when we may see these tornado risks. And of course, high winds and flooding is always a risk with these tropical storms. And so let's time it out for you. If you're out on the Texas coast, here's what the timing looks like. So tonight, you're going to see a lot of the rain starting to come in those regions from Corpus Christi up to Galveston, Port Lavaca, and then you're seeing those red and purple areas. Those are the areas that are indicating heavy rainfall from just this one model, at least in terms of what Tropical Storm Nicholas is going to be doing. And so then you're seeing, especially as we head into the overnight hours, how those reds and purples are increasing over the area, especially from Galveston and all those areas. So a lot of heavy rain is expected, especially in the overnight hours. And this also means we may get a few of those spin up tornadoes. So tornado warnings may be issued in these areas as you're heading into the overnight hours. Just something to be aware of over the next couple hours. And then as we head into the later portion, especially early Tuesday morning, that's when we're going to see some of the heaviest rain now start to push east and into parts of Louisiana. So Louisiana, as early as tomorrow morning, that's when you're going to start to feel the impacts of Tropical Storm Nicholas. And then as we head into Tuesday afternoon, and especially overnight into Wednesday, that's when the rain will all surge into parts of Louisiana. So Louisiana, you're not out of it just yet. So I hope you're making your plans today, because by tomorrow, this is when Tropical Storm Nicholas will arrive in those regions. And then a lot of heavy rain, especially over those areas that saw a lot of rain already this year so far. And then by Wednesday morning, that's when you're going to see the heaviest rain in these regions. So again, the arrival of tropical storm force winds, you're seeing them as early as tonight. And Corpus Christi, you already felt these effects, but by later tonight, those conditions will start to improve just a little bit. But as we head into, let's say, the Galveston region, it's even showing that region in purple. That's 60+ mph wind gusts that are possible. And these tropical storm force winds are also going to arrive all along the Texas coast, and even possibly in that far western region of Louisiana. Houston, you're also going to get in on these gusty winds. So if you live in Houston, just because you're not by the coast, you still will see the impacts of what Tropical Storm Nicholas will bring to those regions. So just something to keep in mind. Tropical storm force winds are a major impact, as well as the heavy localized rain that'll fall there, and flooding, localized flooding, and even the possibility of storm surge as that high tide is going to occur in the overnight hours. And before we wrap this up, I just want to show you the big picture map. Not only are we tracking Tropical Storm Nicholas, it is peak hurricane season. We have to keep in mind two other areas that we are tracking. Although earlier this weekend, there were at maximum 5 storms or areas in interest that we were watching, but that has lessened as those other 2 or 3 have lessened, at least in terms of chances of formation. But the one we're really watching and have been watching for a couple days now is this tropical wave that's just off the coast of Africa right now. It has an 80% chance of formation over the waters. And this is what concerns me, because usually when you get formations just off the coast of Africa and it's a high chance, this does have a chance to especially form over the next coming days. And depending on the track, we have to watch it closely, because it could go north or it could go more towards the US, and especially out there in the Bahamas and those areas. But another area that we're watching is this 50% chance, a little bit closer to home. It right now has a 50% chance of formation over the next 5 days, and over the next 48 hours it doesn't have really much of a chance. So really this is more of a mid to late week type of storm that we need to watch, especially as it is closer to home. And depending on its track, it may bring some swells and even some rip current threats across the East Coast if something were to form over the next coming days. But especially we're watching for our Northeast friends and across the New England area, as they've already seen some of the impacts as well of Hurricane Ida with a lot of rain. If it brings any more rain, that might be something that we need to watch. But of course, these are still far out and we're going to continue to track them. But as we head closer to home and still continue to track what Tropical Storm Nicholas will bring over the Texas coast, right now the forecast 70-mile-per-hour winds as it is close to landfall. That's 4 winds shy of what hurricane status is. So 70-mile-per-hour winds before landfall. It does have the chance to reach 74-mile-per-hour winds hurricane status before it makes landfall. And then after it makes landfall, it'll weaken significantly, but it doesn't mean that the rain threat is over, or even the wind threat. So just something to keep in mind. Even though this may be classified as a tropical storm or even a tropical depression as it's make its way inland, it doesn't mean that the impacts will be lessened. We're still going to see a lot of heavy rain and a lot of wind with these storms. And of course, we'll keep in track with what's happening with Tropical Storm Nicholas over the next coming hours. We are expecting landfall sometime tonight, late tonight, or in the overnight hours. And of course, if you live in any of these areas, make sure your family members are aware, make sure that they have their alerts turned on for anything that were to happen in terms of at least tornado warnings, because we can get some of that there, and especially flood warnings as well, because not only do we have the tornado threat, we also have flash flood watches in effect. And then these heavy rains are going to bring significant flooding possibly to parts of the coastal Texas. So of course, we'll keep you updated here on MyRadar, and we're going to take a look one more last time at the MyRadar before we end this live stream on what exactly this rain is doing right now. And so you can see it has pushed a little bit more north. There isn't a defined center of circulation just yet with Tropical Storm Nicholas, and that's something we're going to watch very closely, because if it can get its act together, especially over the next coming hours, it may reach that that hurricane force wind, and that also may bring hurricane force wind gusts to the Texas coast before it makes landfall. So there it is, just off the coast of Corpus Christi. Corpus Christi already received the brunt of this storm and the heavy rain and wind. But let's take a look at the current status. Right now, the wind speed's at 63 miles per hour. Wind gusts already registered up to 75 miles per hour. And it's just 70 miles south of Port O'Connor, Texas. And we still have tropical storm warnings in place, storm surge watches. Storm surge watches also extend all the way into Louisiana. So there's something important to note. But of course, we're going to continue to track this over the next coming hours as it is making its landfall and its closer approach to Texas. But of course, just remember, if you're in these areas, watch out for flooding. It's a huge risk with the storm, and even the potential of a few quick spin up tornadoes, and even the possibility of some storm surge, especially if you live across the Galveston area from, let's say, Port Lavaca to Galveston, and even Houston. You're going to see some of these impacts. So we'll keep you up to date here, and we'll check back with y'all soon. Have a great day and stay safe.